Hey friends, welcome back to Entrusted to Lead. I'm Danita Cummins. If you're leading through decisions that matter, teams depending on you, deadlines stacking up, and your personal life seems to be competing for the same mental space, then this podcast is totally for you. Today we're starting an 8-episode season on clarity. That's my new favorite word. And I wanted to begin this season with one question for you. What decision are you delaying right now because you are waiting to feel absolutely certain? Here's what I've come to believe. Clarity is not certainty, friend. And confusing the two is costing you momentum, confidence, and peace. So today, I want you to grab your cup of coffee and a pen because we are kicking off 2026 with clarity and focus. You know what to do. Let's get started. There's a quiet belief that many leaders carry, but we rarely admit it out loud. We think, if I were clearer, I wouldn't feel this uncertain. But I am here to tell you today that that belief is completely wrong. I was coaching a director recently, someone who had spent 3 years in their role, and they were doing really great work, of course, and they were highly respected by their team, which is amazing. But they told me something that stopped me in my tracks. They said, I feel like I'm constantly waiting for the moment when I will just know what I'm supposed to do. I think that the fog is going to clear and everything is going to be completely obvious. And I'm starting to worry that maybe that moment is never coming. Maybe you felt that too. There's this unspoken expectation that if you're doing leadership right, then you're supposed to feel certain, confident, and clear. And that doubt means that you must not be ready. You're not capable, or you're not hearing clearly enough from God. Maybe you need to pray more. Maybe it's a crisis of faith. And so you wait. You delay your decisions. You think you need to gather more information. And you hope that if you just think about it long enough, or pray harder, or analyze it more, then the right answers are going to jump out with absolute certainty. But here's what I've come to believe, friends, after 15 years of coaching leaders and leading myself, starting nonprofits, leading businesses. This is the thing I've learned. Absolute certainty is not the gift that we think that it is. In fact, this pursuit of absolute certainty often keeps you from the clarity that you actually need. About what exactly do I mean? Certainty is about outcomes. Clarity is about alignment. Certainty says, will this work? But clarity says, is this faithful to what I'm responsible for right now? Certainty demands proof before you move, but clarity requires enough discernment to take the next right step. And lastly, certainty wants guarantees about the future, right? But clarity makes peace with leading in the present. Most high-stake leadership decisions are made without certainty, but they're never made without clarity, at least not sustainably. So I want you to think about leaders in Scripture for a minute. Abraham left his homeland for a place that God would show him, but he did not tell him exactly where he was going. Moses stood before Pharaoh with a staff and a stutter, without certainly knowing how Pharaoh is going to respond. And Esther walked right into the king's court without knowing if she would walk back out again. But none of those leaders in just those 3 examples had certainty about the outcomes, but they had clarity about being obedient and about the next right step that was in front of them. God really gives us certainty about outcomes, but He consistently offers clarity about what is ours to do right now. What does that look like when we lead with clarity instead of waiting for certainty? I'm going to share with you the 3 questions that I use that create immediate traction when I feel stuck, and hopefully this will help you too. So question number 1 says, what do I actually know right now? Not what do I think, not what do I believe, but what do I actually know? When you're facing a decision, you need to write down what you are certain about. Not what you hope, not what you fear, but what you actually know to be true. You might know your values. You might know your team's capacity in this season, right now. What can we really actually carry? You might know the resources that are available to you, or you might know what's worked before and definitely what hasn't. And you might also know what aligns with your mission and what doesn't. That's not nothing. That's something. But too often we dismiss what we know because it doesn't give us the complete picture. But clarity doesn't require a complete picture. It requires enough light for the next step. I see this all the time in coaching. A leader says, I don't know what to do. And when I ask, what do you know? And they can name 5 or 6 things immediately. They already have more clarity than they think they do. They're just waiting for some level of certainty or a feeling that doesn't exist. They also know that their team is stretched too thin. They know that their current system isn't working, or they know that their energy is going to things that don't matter, and they know what needs to change. They're waiting for certainty about how it will all turn out before they act on what they already know. Question number 2, what decision is actually mine to make right now? This is huge. I think about this all the time because sometimes we're paralyzed, not because the decision is unclear, but because we are trying to make a decision that isn't ours or may never be ours. Your job is to make the wisest decision that you can with the information and the discernment that you have today. And for us who are faith-driven leaders, it is God's job to control the outcome. When we confuse those roles, we shoulder a burden that we were never meant to carry. We think that if we just prayed harder or think longer or wait more patiently, then God will somehow remove all the weight of decisions from us. But that is not usually how He works. He invites us into this process. He asks us to engage our mind, to seek counsel, to examine our hearts, and then we have to step forward in faith. And that outcome, that's His, friend. So let me give you an example from my own leadership journey. I was recently facing a decision about a new organizational structure, whether to maintain how we'd always done things or if it was time to make a very significant shift. I had prayed and I had sought advice from people that I trusted, and I had run multiple scenarios in my ChatGPT, all of the different frameworks, I had laid them all out and all of the different courses of action, but I still didn't have certainty about how it would turn out. But what I did have was clarity that the current situation was limiting our mission, and I knew that I did not have the resources in order to move us forward to the future where I felt like God was calling us to be. But what I did have clarity about was that the current structure was limiting our mission. And I did have clarity that the people involved had the capacity for something new. And I had the clarity that my values pointed toward empowerment rather than control. So I made the decision with some really good friends and wise counsel and prayer. And you know what? It didn't go perfectly. There were adjustments and there were things I didn't anticipate. And there were moments where I second-guessed myself. But it was the right decision. Not because it was flawless or perfect, but because it was faithful to what I knew and who we were called to be. And I also knew that I was being faithful to the capacity that I had in this next season of my life. And here's question 3. What would clarity look like if fear weren't involved? I know this question cuts through so much noise and gets really to the heart of the matter. We don't talk a lot about fear in leadership, but it's there, always under the surface. Because often what we're calling waiting for clarity is actually fear, but wearing professional language. The fear of being wrong, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of the consequences if it doesn't work out, and the fear of what people will think. And those fears are real. I'm not trying to minimize them or tell you not to feel them or consider them, but they're not the same thing as lacking clarity. So when you remove fear from the equation, just for a minute, we can take it off and set it to the side. You can often realize that you already know what needs to happen. You're just afraid to do it. So this is what I want you to ask yourself. If I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do? If I knew God's favor didn't depend on this outcome, what would I choose? If I trusted that my identity isn't tied to getting this right or wrong, then what step would I take? And if I wasn't worried about people or what they think, what would change in my life, or in my team, or in my organization, or in my community? That, friend, is where clarity lives. Now, I want to talk about something that makes all of this possible. Because you can have these 3 questions. You can know the framework. You can understand the difference between clarity and certainty. But if you're not present to where you actually are, none of this is going to work. And here's what I mean. When we are waiting for certainty, we are rarely present. We're mentally living in the future. We're imagining the outcomes, running scenarios, trying to control what hasn't happened yet. I am notorious for living 8 years from now in my head. Or we could be mentally stuck in the past because we're replaying these decisions or second guessing ourselves or wishing we had more information before we had acted or spoke or moved. But we're not here in the present, in this moment, in this decision, and in this reality. And you can't lead from a place where you're not actually present. I am practicing this right now in my own leadership journey, this discipline of presence. Not because it's easy, because actually it's really hard. It's actually one of the hardest things I think I've ever tried to do consistently. But it's because I have realized that you can't endure what you won't acknowledge. When life is hard, when leadership feels heavy, my instincts are to escape mentally, to live these steps and to live 3 steps ahead because here feels like a little bit too much to face today. But that's not resilience. That's avoidance, friend. Real resilience requires being fully present to what is real, the weight, the uncertainty, and the cost, and choosing to stay anyway. So as you work through these questions, as you distinguish between clarity and certainty, I want to invite you to practice presence. I want you to be where you are. I want you to acknowledge what is true, and I want you to feel what's real. Not because it's comfortable. Sometimes it actually might be very uncomfortable, but because it is the only way to lead faithfully through seasons that require more trust than technique. Years ago, I remember sitting in a room with what I like to say the world's heroes and legends, and I watched senior leaders for U.S. Special Operations Command make hard decisions almost on a dime. And I remember one day as we sat in the conference room late at night, kind of going over this multi-million-dollar decision. Hundreds of hours of time had been applied to this project. There were countless people who had dedicated months and months to make this whole solution a reality. And in a moment, we were going to upset that entire apple cart and go a different direction. And the person sitting at the end of the table was the one who had the ultimate decision authority. And I remember watching him, my little GS-12 self, sitting back in the corner of the room, and asking myself, how is he going to make this decision? Not what is the outcome specifically. That was obviously important to me and my team because we had been working for months on this solution. But more so, like, where is his decision matrix coming from, right? Like, what is he using? What matrix is he going to base this decision off of? He's weighing all these options. He's listening to all of these leaders, and they all have compelling reasons why he should go left or go right. And I just remember sitting there watching him, thinking to myself, how is he making this decision? Based on what framework? And I think about that from time to time in my own life as I'm forced to make a decision about something where I don't really know the outcome or the certainty of it. Clarity doesn't come from escaping your current reality. It comes from being fully present to it and trusting God in that place. So here's the truth. Faith doesn't remove uncertainty, friend. Oh, man, I wish it did. If you're on my newsletter or if you've received any of the newsletters or emails I've sent this last few months, you will know that my faith has not changed the outcome of many situations. But it does remove the demand that I can control the outcome. And that part I've had to struggle with and be angry about and bargaining with God and all the things. But I come back to this place of trust because trust replaces certainty, not with passivity, but with a grounded courage. It's like a silent, steady heartbeat, an anchor that sits underneath whatever's happening in the world and in our lives every single day. If you think about Hebrews 11, it's this great faith chapter, right? But every single person that's listed there acted without certainty. They didn't know how things were going to turn out. They just knew what God was asking them to do next. And I have lived by that story for many years where I come back to this message that my husband said, "What do you have in your hand today, Danita?" I have this one thing. Then that's all God asks you to do today. Use that one thing. And it has been true over and over and over again. By faith, Abraham obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. He didn't have certainty about the destination, but he had clarity about his obedience. Faith teaches us that we can move forward without knowing everything. You can. Trust me, it's hard, but you can. And that obedience doesn't require foresight, and that God goes with us even when the path isn't clear. And that means that you can lead with clarity even when you don't have certainty. So here's what I've noticed about leaders who lead with clarity rather than waiting for certainty. This is the reality. This is what it looks like. No kidding, day in, day out, real life, boots on the ground. They move faster, they learn faster, they sleep better, which we all love, and they grow deeper in their trust with God. They move faster because they're not reckless, but they have this appropriate speed where they are not endlessly gathering information or waiting for this perfect condition to occur. They learn faster because they are actually doing things. They're making adjustments. They're getting real feedback instead of running these theoretical scenarios in their head over and over and over again. And they sleep better because they've released the burden of knowing the outcomes, and they've embraced the responsibility of this faithful decision-making and saying, this is all I am called to carry today. And they grow deeper in their trust with God because every single step forward in less than certain conditions becomes an exercise in faith. Friend, I don't know if you considered your life in the world as an exercise in faith, but my life every single day, every single meeting, every single decision, every single spreadsheet is very much an exercise in faith. So let me ask you these 3 questions. What decision are you delaying because you're waiting for certainty? What next step do you actually have enough clarity to take? You probably have one. There's probably something today that you've been wrestling with and you don't know the answer and you're waiting for clarity. But if you really stop and sit down, you have all the information you need to make a best decision today. And number 3, what would change if you distinguished between what you are responsible to know and what you are responsible to trust God with? Those are 2 radically different things. We are not infinite beings. We are finite creatures with finite mental capacity, finite resources, money, time, talents, treasures. We are finite, but God is infinite. What are the things that you are holding that are actually God's responsibility? So here's my invitation as we begin this season, which I'm super excited about, by the way, season 4. Can't believe it. This is crazy. I want you to stop waiting for the fog to completely clear because, hey, guess what? It won't. It's not. I'm just here to tell you. I am hitting the big 5-0 this year, and clarity is part of my everyday life. But instead, I want you to ask for enough light for the next step. And then I want you to take it. I want you to take it. I want you to be bold. I want you to be brave. I want you to be courageous. You don't have to have it all figured out. It doesn't have to be perfect, friend, but just trust and step and move. Because the myth of this absolute certainty is that it will make you a better leader. But the truth is, it will only make you a stuck one. Clarity is better, and I truly believe that clarity is enough. So over the next 7 episodes, we are going to explore what gets in the way of clarity and what to do about it. So if you are carrying too much, or you feel like you're doing too much, and you feel like you are leading alone, or you are stuck in reactive mode, then you are in the right place, friend. If you're not sure which episode to listen to next, I have created a quick quiz, which is called What's Secretly Sabotaging Your Leadership? It's a 90 seconds, and based on your answers, it's only 5 questions. So, because we need simple, I get it. It's going to tell you what's holding you back and which episodes that you should address. And if you take the quiz, I will immediately drop in your inbox 5 days of information and an action plan that can help you get clear and focus right where you are today. So I want you to hop over, take the quiz, pop over to DennyDeCummins.com, check that out and all the resources. Sign up for the newsletter so you can get the latest updates. And I am super excited to walk on this journey with you, friend. This is Entrusted to Lead, and I'm Denny DeCummins, and thank you for listening. Next episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most common patterns that keeps leaders stuck, carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. So have an amazing day, friend. And remember to keep showing up every day, even when it hurts, because you matter. I'll see you later.